Philip,
Yes.
do you have a phone on or a microphone? There's a huge feedback loop.
I don't think that's me.
So if anybody has two things on at the same time or two devices, that's what's causing this loop. You can mute one of your devices. And when I say mute, turn the volume down. Mute your volume. Can everybody hear? Okay.
I think we're okay?
All
right.
Nope.
I don't think it's me.
I don't think it's me either, but wait, I'm gonna try muting. I'll mute everybody. If I mute everybody, hold on, where's that? Oh, here's Melena trying to come in, so let me. Melena?
Yeah, hi, hello.
Melena, oh, there you go.
Yeah, sorry for my delay, just like.
Okay, no, it's
track things down.
There's a learning curve. We all learn that.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
All right, so welcome. All right, so we're just kicking off here, and if any of us have a second device open, we probably need to turn it off for the echo. Echo. Okay, try it again. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's February 12, 2022 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible.
Eileen. So you guys, I think I'm going to mute everybody.
Yeah, let's do that.
I think Eileen's having the problem.
Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public body and or parties with a right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so via the instructions at the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In addition, pursuant to Massachusetts General Law 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body, or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. And do you see who's recording our meeting tonight? Or
well, I am recording it, of course, on the town's Zoom system. I don't know anybody else who's recording. If anybody wants to raise their hand and let me know. No, I think it's just the town recording.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order and initiate a roll call vote. Roll call. Ann, are you?
Sure. I'm Ann O'Dwyer, and I'm the vice chair of the committee, and I'm here.
Melena?
I am. Am I unmuted? Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah. Okay, I'm Melena Cherna, and I'm here.
Madonna?
I'm Madonna Marr, and I'm here.
Okay, and I'm Philip Orenstein, and I've been the chair, and I'm present as well. So again, now that we've gotten our technology working, welcome to all our two new members tonight. Melena Cerna, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
Yes.
And Madonna Marr. as well.
you.
So again, welcome and congratulations on your election victory, and we appreciate your taking the time to contribute to this committee. I'll ask you to correct me where I go wrong here, but I believe this is our first meeting with new members. After the election, we need to reorganize, which is to elect a chair and a co-chair. I will say, is there a motion on that regard?
Philip, I would like to make a motion, and I would like to make a motion that you continue as chair of the Finance Committee.
I second.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Do we want to have any further discussion of that?
Do you want to do it?
I appreciate the question. I'm happy to continue doing it. I've settled in a bit, and with Anne's help, I think we're operating relatively smoothly. So I'm happy to continue that. But I didn't want to be presumptuous that no one else would want to do it. But I'm happy to continue doing that. So I guess seeing no further discussion, we would have a roll call vote.
I'll start the vote. I vote aye.
Aye.
And I guess I will vote aye as well. So thank you. And we need afterwards, I would make a motion to nominate Ann O'Dwyer as our co-chair.
Second.
Could I amend? So some discussion. Could I open for discussion? Is it co-chair or vice chair?
I said co-chair, but I think I should have said vice chair.
I would. My preference would be a motion to that we change that to vice.
I think that may. I'm not sure why I said co-chair, so I don't probably read too much into that. Maybe perhaps it was some slip of the mind, but
Sure.
But I think I would make a motion to nominate you as vice chair of the Finance Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, a roll call vote. Donna?
Oh, sorry.
Aye.
Milena?
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
I'm aye as well. Okay, so we have the chair and the vice chair. Thank you. Next would be approval of the minutes of the meeting of April 19th. I had a careful conversation with Mark Propensky, our town manager, and Jennifer Messina, our town clerk, regarding the quandary of how to approve these minutes. And their Solomonic wisdom is that we can, in fact, invoke the rule of necessity to approve these minutes. Which would it mean that basically Anne and myself can vote to approve these minutes, and we would not have to convene a special meeting and drag back our prior members just for that approval. So I would make I've reviewed the minutes. I would make a motion to approve these minutes.
I would happily second that motion. And actually, I just want to comment. I thought they were really very good minutes.
Yes, no, they're prepared. Very carefully and rigorously, and we appreciate the help from Stacy. So these are the minutes, again, just to confirm, of April 19th. So any discussion? Seeing none, a roll call vote to approve the minutes of April 19 using the rule of necessity. Anne?
I vote aye.
And I vote aye as well. And just one last thing, as I would ask Stacy when she goes through these minutes, is we would want to record the fact that we did invoke the rule of necessity to approve these minutes. Okay. Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda, and we may not sort of figure this out tonight, but there is a on the Community Preservation Committee, which Milena, you may know something about, but not much about, and that's okay. And Madonna, perhaps you might know more about it, but that's not. We could touch upon that later. But there is a standing member of the Finance Committee that sits on that committee, and Tom Blovelt was that Finance Committee member as well as the chair of that committee, and he is now no longer in that role. So we do need to decide upon a Finance Committee member to sit on the Community Preservation Committee. Their next meeting is somewhere in the third week of June. I checked on that with Chris Rembold. I'm not sure they set a specific date. And they don't meet 12 times a year. I think they sort of meet 6 or 8 times a year, approximately. And again, a finance committee member is an observer and sits on that particular committee.
Philip,
So,
can I ask you, what is the mission of that Community Preservation Committee? What's its purpose? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just very, very quickly. I mean, that's an important question. We don't need to decide this tonight. I don't want to put any of our new members on the spot about making decisions to do this or to not to do this. So you should have time to consider it. But there's a special tax that we all pay, which funds the Community Preservation Fund, and those funds are used, and those taxes are raised and are matched by the state to create a specialized fund to basically invest in the town's infrastructure or special institutions within the town that are important to the town that may otherwise not receive appropriate funding to either maintain themselves or to repair buildings or such as just as an example, the committee has voted to invest a significant chunk of money to redo Memorial Baseball Field right near the middle of town, near the food co-op. But there are many other investments that they've made in the town. So this committee gets together. It's a diverse committee from a number of different fields and functions of the town to figure out how to spend those monies. And Chris Rembold, who wears many hats, he's the assistant town manager, but he oversees that particular activity. So that's a very quick overview of what that is.
Eileen has her hand up. I don't know, Eileen, did you want to comment on that? I just promoted you to be able to talk.
Okay, I'm unmuted. The committee is meeting next week. I have to look up what day. I think it's Wednesday. Basically, to prepare presentations for town meeting, but it would be a chance for people to go and observe, get a feel for what it does.
Well, that's a good. Okay, thank you, Eileen. That's a helpful item. I did not know that. I don't want to put Madonna and Milena on the spot. We also have we have an additional member that will be coming on board, hopefully in the next month or two, perhaps. That person may or may not be interested. So if there's no one interested tonight, I would probably myself just try to sit in on that next meeting just to make sure we know what's going on and to not leave that spot blank. But I would first want to open it up to Milena and Madonna to see if you're interested in that. And again, to repeat, if you wanted to wait and think about it and research that, you can do that.
Well, yeah, I think I would like to myself get more familiar with what they do and all of it. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be here next week. We are leaving for Europe, but I definitely would like to spend a little bit more time on it if that's okay. Yeah,
Madonna.
I just want to say that, I'm also on the zoning board, so I'm I don't really want to take on yet another committee. I feel like that would be.
Sure. No, understood. Yeah. And again, we're not.
But I like what the community preservation does, so.
No, it's good, and everyone has a pretty positive feeling about it. And does good things. So why don't we? I will pitch in at least in the beginning here, and I'll attend the next meeting and maybe try to attend the meeting thereafter. And Milena, this will give you a time to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a great deal of information on the website, and if you need some assistance, please reach out to me or to Anne or to Chris Rembold, and we'll help you there. And we'll just sort of see how it goes. But I will do it on an interim basis.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I guess I just need to jump in for 1 second. Eileen, I see your hand is still raised, so I'm going to go ahead and lower it. So re-raise it if you want to make a second point, an additional point or question. Okay. All right. I do want to say, so I don't see Mark in the people in the audience, so I don't have Mark there to promote up at this point. So
okay, well, perhaps he'll join us later. We'll skip over his update.
You want to move Sue up so and get the update from the finance directors?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. Just since they usually go back to back, so later. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Phil, while you were on the phone earlier, Anne had mentioned touching upon the April reports. I know they only just came out, so I'm leaving that up for you guys. I'm sure you didn't have much opportunity to even look them over as they came out late in the afternoon.
Well, I guess I'm just fine if there's anything that you're noticing. I didn't look at them, or just anything that we should look at in the next month, or.
I can give you a bit of good news. When you do take a look at the snow and ice budget, we had, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, I believe there was 30 to 50,000 of open purchase orders, encumbrances still. And in working with the DPW administrative assistant, she called the vendors, took a look, and we were able to close most of those POs, which will reduce the deficit in snow and ice. We had already paid all the invoices.
Oh, great.
So that is really good news, and that will show up it does not reflect in the April report because we just did that about a week or so. I think it was a week ago that we did that. It's approximately, I'm trying to do this quickly. Of course, I can't find it. It was approximately about $30,000. So it should reduce the deficit was about 55,000. So that'll bring that down quite a bit. So that's good news. Nothing else was really alarming or noteworthy on the April report. But that does lead me to give you a bit of and I'm glad Steve's on the meeting as well. You may or may not know that during the last 2 months of the fiscal year, the departments can transfer funds between salaries and non-salary line items with the approval of the Select Board and Finance Committee, which would require a joint meeting of both. And I have had at least 3 departments approach me about that. So I just want to put that on your radar that we will probably have to schedule a meeting before July 15th of the two, of both the Select Board and Finance Committee.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
You've warned us about that in the past, so I appreciate that. It's any kind of joint meeting is a scheduling challenge more than anything else. So let's try to, as soon as we need it, let's try to figure that out.
Yeah, I'll try to touch. We have a department head meeting tomorrow morning, so I'll bring it up to all the departments and I'll get them to, give me a commitment that they need this meeting. But I have had at least 3 departments approach me, so I'm going to say we probably have to.
Okay, I did take a quick look at it. I guess, can you explain on page 9 what's going on with maybe you've mentioned this before and I forgot, the Council on Aging van drivers. It seems like we had an allocation for that and none of that's been used, if I read that correctly.
Sure. Yeah, you are correct. At the time we prepared the budget last year, it was based on knowing we needed to fund that. As you know, the transportation program was new mid last fiscal year. And at that time, we didn't have a grant specifically for transportation, but Polly has secured, we now receive what's called the SIG transportation grant, and that is funding the van drivers right now. So I'm not sure it'll make it through the whole fiscal year. We may have to use a little bit of this money. I have to take a look at the grant and have a conversation with Polly. But yeah, we had to be conservative because that program was new and, we weren't sure whether we were getting grants or if the revolving fund was going to sustain it in the beginning.
Now, are those funds available to transfer to another department that may need it?
that can be done and that's a great point. Thank you. Yes, but that would also require the joint meeting.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, but that's, perhaps Polly has other needs for that. I don't want to assume that that's not the case, but obviously that would be helpful for the other circumstances that you're dealing with. I think I heard you mention that you thought that we didn't want to talk about this report on a monthly basis. I don't think that's the case. If I gave you that impression, then I spoke, or that was not my intent. Perhaps it was because of the prior meeting. We had all those budgetary requests coming in. It was all jammed up.
Gotcha. Okay.
But no. And Milena and Nadana, I'm assuming you haven't seen this before.
Not yet. So I would like, I think I got an email from Susan. Thank you so much. And I definitely will take you on it. I will need some,
It's an informative and confounding document.
I'm sure it will be interesting to read. Yeah,
we see every month, and it's not always intuitive, but Sue is the master of everything in there, and thank you for offering to explain that to our new members.
Oh, absolutely. I have no issue with that at all. Whatever's convenient for you guys.
Okay. All right, so you've alerted us on some of these budgetary issues. Sue, anything else you want to mention?
I just wanted to let you know that the fiscal 21 audit has been underway for the past about a month and a half. They're just wrapping up. Well, they wrapped up the field work where they were on site. They're wrapping up a few more items. I'm anticipating the financial drafts hopefully within a month. I just know they still have a few more items that they're waiting on from the town, but I think with a lot of luck, we should see the draft financials in a month and a half.
Now, knock on wood, is that being done under normalized work conditions as opposed to during the COVID years where certain in-person activities were done more remotely?
It's a little bit hybrid this year. Some of the initial work was done remotely, and then they were on site. Just a couple of them were on site about 2 weeks ago, the past couple of weeks. And they actually had planned to have 4 or 5 of them there, and then several of them came down with COVID. So, but it's getting back there. I think next year we'll be fully on, provided COVID stays
okay, and just given what happened in prior years, based on what you know now, are there any events that would postpone the audit being completed in a more normalized timetable?
God, I hope not.
Okay, so you're not aware of anything currently. I know things change. I understand that, but
can I ask who are the auditors?
It's Scanlon and Associates out of South Deerfield. They specialize in municipal. Yes.
Okay.
They do a great deal of work for towns, Mercer County, Massachusetts. It's a fairly long list. I looked into that a bit. Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for booting me up.
Okay. All right. So Stu, you're welcome to stay, but if you need to leave, then that's okay too, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Sue, if something comes up, I can always just drop you a quick email or text.
Okay. No, I'll stay on for a little bit and see if you guys need me for anything. No problem. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm going to turn now to the next item in the agenda, which is basically this, it's page 8 in the packet. Hopefully you can access that, which is the...
Philip, would you mind if I shared it on the screen?
That would be great, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I think it's really nice to look at something together, yeah. Can everybody see it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, so this was my effort to try to help us make a collective decision on where we should spend our time as a committee. Again, just for the benefit of the new members, I've only been in the committee for a year now, so I've only learned it recently. But we have a handful of specified functions based in the town charter, but in addition to that, we can be described as a fiscal watchdog, and we just need to determine where we spend our time and what we focus on in terms of what we study, and try to study with an idea of making recommendations to the select board and the town. So based on some of our discussions and some brainstorming, this is my list of what I believe is sort of on the table of potential topics for discussion. And I certainly encourage you both to, again, I appreciate you just started this, so this is all might be confounding and confusing to you, but you could ponder this and think about topics you may want to add, topics you feel maybe should be deleted, and maybe more importantly, think about where you may want to volunteer to spend a little more time and to do some research in between meetings for the benefit of the committee's decision-making process. As you can see, I just lost. We've first on the list was the Community Preservation Committee liaison or member, and we covered that, and I'll do that on an interim basis. Next on the list is a pending item that we're awaiting Mark to come back to us, so we're going to skip over that for now. And then I'm going to, I would recommend that the committee spend some significant time on the topic of funding for our post-retirement medical benefits. Let's come back to that, but just to continue down the list, the next one, we discussed briefly before. I think there was some support for that, but given we had members who were departing, we put that on hold. What I'd like to go ahead and do is invite the assessor, town collector, and potentially others to attend our meetings, speak briefly about what they do, and maybe to try to spend some focused time on sort of important topics that may relate to the finance committee.
So can I ask you something?
Please.
And by the way, I think you pretty much, it's the most comprehensive list. So you have all the important topics for the town here. So I think the list is excellent. But in terms of myself, I would like to find out a little bit more about the tax assessment process in Great Barrington. So would that be, maybe that's something that's, is well known to everybody else, but if that's the case, should I go there, just kind of spend some time there, or would that be something for the committee to get involved with?
I appreciate that. It's certainly it's certainly a topic of interest for everyone in town for a wide variety of reasons. So I appreciate your interest. So I would be delighted to focus in on that. I think what I would suggest is that we start off by asking. I'm having a senior moment. I'm spacing. I can't remember the name of our assessor. Right. You can help me, Sue? You're on mute.
I couldn't unmute myself. It's Ross.
Ross. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm embarrassed, but I think Ross is our assessor, and he's relatively new. So another reason why we waited with him is he had a huge amount of work to do to get himself set up in that role.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd love to do is I'd like to propose that I go ahead and invite him to speak to a meeting. We'll obviously work on the scheduling. We want to give him, if he wants time to prepare, we need to do that. And we don't want to, we need to work with his schedule. I think it's probably best to start with some type of discussion presentation to the committee, and then then we could talk about areas of potential follow-up. And certainly, if you would be willing to do that, that would be terrific. Obviously, anything related to the assessor is always an issue about confidentiality. So, by definition, we're dealing with the sort of personal financial matters.
Sure.
So, as you may have noticed, all of the meetings of the Board of Assessors are held in executive session. As an example. So So that there's an issue of confidentiality that permeates all of this, but I do agree that it's a very relevant topic. Anecdotally, there's always a bit of an, I hear plenty of comments about sort of an air of mystery about the assessment process, and it affects people's pocketbooks, so everyone is concerned about it.
Right.
So I appreciate your interest. Why don't I go ahead and call his office and just work on setting up an initial discussion with our committee. I'll if anyone has any particular items of focus, think about that. Perhaps send me an email. But I'll probably just try to keep it a bit informal and open ended, and just say we're just trying to understand the process a bit more, and and try to figure out if he has certain concerns, or if Mark has certain concerns, and perhaps how the finance committee could potentially assist in some of that.
I guess you raised something that I didn't realize. I mean, I'm not quite understanding what the confidentiality is. Is it if somebody contests their assessed value? Because our assessed values are public, and the process, I assume, should be transparent.
Should be transparent. Absolutely, I agree with you.
I certainly agree, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I completely agree with that. I mentioned the confidential Board of Assessors meetings because it's something I've always I wonder about, and again, it would be very useful just to understand where that line is drawn between what's obviously public, which Ann's comments I completely agree with, and what's private, and why those meetings in executive session.
So Sue has her hand up.
Thank you, Ann. I can answer that question. Obviously, Ross could get certainly more in depth, but when they're in executive session, they're voting on and discussing abatement applications, which those are confidential.
Okay.
That's a good point. I've noticed that some other towns, I've looked into it, some other towns will have a big chunk of the meetings of the Board of Assessors in executive session, but not all of them. So we virtually have all of them. So again, there's probably a reason for that. We just don't know. So that would be useful to understand that a bit.
So if I may, so the abatement information is not public?
To the best of my knowledge, it is not.
Really interesting.
I can tell you the abatement dollar amounts, that were issued, but
right. That's what I meant. Yeah. Yeah, the amount, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. We can report on dollar amounts, but I don't believe, I know that they do vote on them in executive session.
Okay, all right. So there's additional discussion maybe about the topic that's confidential, but the actual amount is in public domain.
That's my understanding, yes.
I mean, that's how it is done everywhere else. So, I'm just kind of trying to figure out. Yeah.
I will leave that up to Ross to get into the specifics, so I don't want to speak on that.
No, I think that's appropriate too. I don't want to. We want to make sure we get this, from the right from the source.
Yeah.
But okay, so we'll follow up with that, and what I'd like to also do is to talk to the Treasurer Collector's Office about a discussion there, and. Particularly with their activities relating to, they are the ones who, is my understanding, is if there are properties that are sufficiently behind in their taxes, the town will foreclose and take ownership of those properties and subsequently sell them off. And the Treasurer's Office is orchestrating that. And that has a pretty material revenue implication to the town. So I thought it would be useful to try to understand that process a little better. And so that's the intention there. Okay, so I think that's what's covered that. A review of budget reserves is one of my favorite topics. We've discussed that a fair amount. I don't want to belabor the point. It's sort of related to the OPEB discussion, so we'll come back to that. Houstonic Waterworks and Monument Mountain are very large topics with potentially very significant financial implications. But I think in general, the Finance Committee is waiting to understand what the select board is seeking to do, or the regional school district is doing, and then we would evaluate the financial implications of that. So we are sort of waiting to figure out what those other entities are doing, and then we proceed from there.
But Philip, this is Anne. I guess I do wonder if this relates to, I think something we've talked about at past meetings too, is sort of trying to get a handle on capital in spending and the capital budget. And I see this as fitting in here, and maybe, again, I think this has a lot on our plate, and maybe this doesn't have to be the year, but at some point, educating ourselves about the long range capital planning that goes in. All the departments come to us with their capital needs, but they have 5-year plans that Sue does include with the budget book, but maybe for us to educate ourselves before the budget season, because chances are these are going to have significant impacts on our capital borrowing. So.
No, I completely agree. And that's a good point. That is a pretty significant undertaking. I've tried to do a bit of that on my own, just to sort of get the basics. My high level generalization is that the town is in pretty decent shape right now in terms of its debt burden, and as indicated by many things, including our AAA rating from S&P. But that's certainly subject to change potentially if we are looking to undertake very significant investment initiatives, either in building a new high school or some significant undertaking with respect to the Housatonic Waterworks. But I agree. It's there's that's a very important topic, which I guess I'm taking the view that it's if we did that now and then one of these events triggered, then that analysis is essentially totally out of date, and we would need to redo it again. That being said, we should leave it on the list and continue to think about spending more time on it.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there as
well. No, that's a very important point.
It's a significant part of our budget every year when we're trying to sort of keep the budget down, and then we keep borrowing more, and again, and I voted at the recent budget meetings to support that borrowing because there are things we have to do, and there's equipment we have to have, but we just keep borrowing, and I just worry. So.
Another one is another topic which I'd like to spend a few moments on is there is a document that the town has called I'm sure I get this right. It's the Budget and Financial Policy for the town, and I included it in the packet. And it's a bit unique to the town, and a lot of other towns don't seem to have this, unless I missed it. I did a little bit of checking, but it's a document that's referred to, I believe, in the town charter that we need to have every year as a part of our budgetary process. And it's a 4-page document. There's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of things that aren't covered in there. It's one of these documents where my sense is that many people agree it needs to be updated, but it's a fairly difficult undertaking. It requires a lot of discussion and consensus, and the town has too many other things on its plate to really be able to do that. And so it has been slightly improved, modified, corrected over the years, but it hasn't been revamped. My observation personally, there's a lot of very good information in here. It's a bit of a hodgepodge of what I would describe as budget policy, as well as just budgetary process and procedures relating to how the town goes through a certain multiple month-long process to put together its budget and to have it approved. So again, for our new members, I'm throwing a lot at you up front, so I'm probably doing a good job of confusing you. But
No.
My sense is it would be great to, if you haven't had the opportunity to spend some time with this, and maybe I would propose that we perhaps allocate some time at our next meeting to have more of a deep dive into this document and to think about how we can update it. It will take a fair amount of time to get to a document, and then the select board needs to basically get a crack at it as well, and
right.
it needs to be approved essentially before Christmas, so that we have it on an approved basis for next year's budgetary process. Correct me if I got that wrong, Sue, but it needs some time, and it'll probably be a relatively lengthy process to get it fully approved by both committees.
So if I'm looking, just the page that's up here. So it seems to me, the strategic priorities, that's what should be kind of the underlying rationale for the budget, right? That's how decisions should be made. And the same thing with the financial goals. And I would imagine those two do change. The economy changes, priorities change, and all that. And so the question I have is that something that is being basically set for some time now, or do we feel it needs some revisions, or these are just kind of that to me is really the guideline for how decisions should be made, frankly.
Let me defer to Sue on that, and Anne. But my sense is this hasn't been significantly revised in quite a bit of time. Would you agree, Anne?
Well, Sue, what do you think? I think.
You want me to talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know this document has been in place for the 4.5 years that I have been here. I do feel, having, come with my background, that, revisions could be made to it and updates. Mark and I did try to do that the first year he was here, but it was too late in the game at that point. But I think the document's been around for a while, and there's only been minor changes to it.
Yeah, I've stared at this a while. I think it's very hard to get consensus on this, and everyone will have different opinions, and they're all valid opinions. It will probably be a useful conversation to have, both in the Finance Committee and the Select Board, about potential revisions to this document. Will those be painful? Potentially, yes. But I think my sense is they would be useful conversations to have for future decision making. For example, there is really no reference in here to hopefully I'm not missing it, to affordable housing. It's referred to by extension when it refers to the town's master plan, which talks a great deal about housing. But there's no discussion here about the recent conversations about the importance of affordable housing and the town's need to invest in affordable housing. That's gotten a great deal of attention for all the right reasons for the last year or two, and it's not included here. There also is no reference to the topic of free cash and how that's used. Many towns will have a policy about what is their target free cash balance on a percentage basis. Can we get to an agreement on that? Perhaps not, but it's probably a useful conversation to have. My sense is it's one of the most, it's one of the few controversial topics, or just topics where people have varying opinions in our budget process. And I think it would be useful just to talk about that at a higher level before we get into the math of the next budget year. We don't talk about local option revenue and cannabis revenue, and that's obviously big dollars that feed into free cash. And how do we use that? We also have the murky issue of, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. We have a little bit of a lack of clarity as to the town's discretion over its free cash balance, which Mark is working with town council to try to clarify. And and there's no reference to. Keep coming back to the post retiree medical benefits. We don't talk about that at all here, and that's a meaningful topic. And there's also we talk about maintaining a top level bond rating. The town is currently AAA. Does that mean we want to stay AAA? Or what does top mean? So I just throwing that out as just things that have occurred to me when I've read this that I think would be helpful to try to, at the very least, talk about some more, and if not reach any resolution, just benefit from talking about it. And perhaps just organizationally, we can divide it into a policy piece as well as a procedures piece, and that this might be, a little more helpful. So I'll stop talking on that.
Eileen just might have had a clarification point.
Okay.
She had her, Eileen?
Okay.
Go ahead, go ahead. Are you able to? Hold on just one second. Try again, Eileen.
Must have lost her.
All right, well,
she's muted, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So Madonna.
Whenever she can come back, we'll let her on. Madonna.
Bill, I just was wondering, do you see any glaring errors aside from the absence of what you just mentioned about free cash, affordable housing, cannabis, and local revenue? Do you see?
Yeah, there's no. I don't see any glaring errors other than there's a typo. There's a repeated bullet point under financial management policy, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with this. So in the prior budget cycle, this document was essentially adopted with one minor change relating to funding of small ticket assets on a and how those are funded. So it was virtually adopted from the prior year. So it's okay. It's not broken. I think it's more sort of issues and more sort of broader policy issues about what it doesn't address.
Yeah.
And just trying to use that as a vehicle to sort of bring certain issues to light.
Okay, thank you.
Eileen, I'm trying a different order thing.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Kevin O'Donnell put the policy in when he was town manager 3 people back, as a way of describing to finance committee members and selectmen what each board's role was in the budget process. It wasn't intended as an in-depth, comprehensive manual.
Okay, that's an interesting point. I guess Juan and I think what we should do is let me go back and check in the town charter about what is the real written language as to what this document is supposed to do. I think that's a useful point. And if we spend some time on it, then we want to make sure what we're doing is consistent with what is in the town charter or bylaws.
So can I ask a question here? So when it comes to the budget, I mean, how are the strategic priorities set for the town that will drive the budgetary decisions? Is there any process, or are we more tactical here? Or I'm sorry to ask all these difficult questions, but I mean, that to me, it's kind of a fundamental thing. Yeah,
that's a great question.
Yes, I guess I can comment if that's okay, Philip. I mean, I'm sad.
Please, yeah.
I can't. I mean, I think that this is my 5th year, maybe my 6th. Maybe I'm not sure, but So I've been through several budget cycles, and I guess I just want to say, I think, many of the services that the town provides that are part of the town budget
Right.
are associated with various aspects of what is in the master plan and in the strategic plan to provide for members of the community. I'm just kidding. And that, and I can think of, several occasions, and I'm sorry, not one specific is coming to mind, but I know that there are times when there are some difficult budget conversations about a department needing more funds or requesting more funds, and the finance committee is struggling with whether or not to recommend those funds, and we do come back to the strategic plan and how it fits in with the goals of the town. So I think we do. I mean, I don't think we use it as if we're coming to the budget season every year and we're starting from scratch. But when we think about where we're allocating those funds, we do refer back to the plan. So it does come up.
Okay.
I think I would agree with that. I think that's well said. I think that the town staff does a very good job, Mark and Chris, in, as they have the vast majority of the working conversations with staff about budgetary issues. I think they very much keep the master plan, which obviously you should spend some time with, in mind when they work with departments about where they believe they should spend their money. So it does happen. I don't want to put words in Mark's mouth, but I think he would speak eloquently about how they very much use the master plan in their budgetary process. But a great deal of that is something that the finance committee is not directly involved with.
I see. Okay, so it gets done at that level. Yeah.
Right. So we are examining the end product of a lot of that work at the staff level.
Right. And I think, I know Sue meets a lot of times department heads as well to talk about how do their requests relate to
master plan. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So certainly when I mention housing, if Mark were here or Chris Rembold were here, they would probably make a very valid point that the master plan spends an enormous amount of detail on that topic. So maybe it's not appropriate for this document to sort of redo that work in a less thoughtful way. So that's possible. We need to think about that. But I do think that improvements could be made, to this document. And so I conclude that maybe I recommend that we all spend a little more time with it, and in our next meeting, maybe have a little more of a specific conversation about it. And to the extent people can put their thoughts in writing, and we can include that in the packet, that might be a very efficient way to do it, because, it's having people talk about what a 4-page memo can look like can be a bit of an inefficient process.
Discussion. Yeah, exactly.
We've all been there on that.
Yeah.
So why don't we? So we'll leave that one there. Just finishing up the list is the next year's budget process for our new members. You could start planning on spending more time in if I'm getting this right, Sue, it's really February, which is the extensive joint meetings between the finance committee and the select board, going through the budget on a line by line basis. And Sue and her colleagues at the staff level will spend a lot of time in January and beforehand putting together the budget binder that is the end product of a lot of their work. And last but not least is just the something that's just on our docket for potentially review is that the this was touched upon in the budget process. The building inspector's fees have not been updated in the last 10 years. And so the town is probably, particularly in an inflationary environment, is undercharging for its services to local contractors and builders, et cetera. So it's something that needs to be reviewed. I'm not sure who is the right person to do it. So we'll just leave that on the list for now. So again, feel free to, this is sort of a running document. any member should feel this is it's not just mine, this is everyone's. And if you want to make changes and move things around, just please don't be bashful about that. Okay, so OPEB. We don't want to spend too much time on it tonight. It's a very large, complex topic. But I do believe it should be an item of focus for the committee with an objective, and this will take time, but our objective should be to make some recommendations to the select board in the fall, and then the select board can spend some time with it, and then it can be included in our town meeting process for next year. So it's one of those things where we have a lot of time, but it's going to take a lot of time to get this through our decision-making process as a town. And again, at a very high level, there's two topics here. There's the decision on whether or not and how to establish a trust vehicle, which would be the depository and a custodian of funds that the town would put in there, which would be used for the sole purpose of paying for the town's medical benefits to its retired employees. That process is, I would describe as complex but procedural in nature. And the state has put together a very detailed memo, which I included in the packet, which is very exciting reading, about all the steps that we need to go through to establish the trust. And again, it's very specific, and we need, and it will require a fair amount of time from town staff and probably town council to do all this right. But there is a fairly distinct and clear roadmap from the state on how to do it. And a lot of other towns in the county have done it. So presumably we could get some assistance from them if that was appropriate.
Is it a state requirement or?
No, it's big picture. There's no there's no requirement that we fund for retiree medical benefits. That's a countrywide issue. Mm-hmm. So our pension benefits for our employees, there's an obligation, and by law we need to fund for that.
Right.
We've done that, and a lot of money is put aside, and that's all nicely taken care of, hopefully. The retiree medical benefits are very important benefits to our employees. They're a significant financial undertaking for the town, but historically there's been no requirement to fund.
Right.
So we just, the town funds on what's referred to as a pay-as-you-go basis, and whatever the cost of those benefits is in a year, that's what we do. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Our accountants say that, and just rough numbers, and I'll qualify this by saying that I've asked Mark and town staff to confirm to us all the right numbers that we should use in our study process. And Mark's not here tonight, so we don't have that. But based upon the actuarial report that the town puts out that is public, mm-hmm. My sense is that the approximate annual cost of the benefits last few years has been roughly $450,000. Mm-hmm. Our accountants would say that based upon a very complex calculation, our liability for future benefits is about $21 million.
Oh, wow.
So it's a big number. It's a countrywide, statewide issue in terms of that liability being relatively unreserved or unfunded. Yeah. And so I'm not trying to, I don't want to, again, I'm just trying to, this is a complex issue. I'm just laying it out in very high level, simplistic terms. But the town needs to think about, whether or not it wants to start putting some money aside for the future benefits in addition to what it needs to pay on an annualized basis. Now, in the March packet, I put together a schedule as to what some of the other towns are doing. Some towns have fully funded their liability. Others have funded zero, like Great Barrington. Many towns have gone through the process of establishing the trust and then putting away relatively small amounts, but meaningful amounts of money to just begin to fund that particular obligation. There are many reasons to do that. Again, big picture, my sense is that I feel we should increase the awareness of this particular obligation on the town's part, both in terms of what it may cost, just as much as its importance to the retirees who are relying on that. So we're not trying to, we don't have the authority, and I'm not trying to get anywhere near cutting anyone's benefits, but it's a big dollar amount that tends not to get a fair amount of attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to just increase the transparency of this matter on the town's books. And one way is to make it clear that we should reserve for it in some amount, and to talk about what that amount should be. We can talk to other towns as part of our study process. Ann and I touched upon that briefly. I went ahead, just anticipation of this discussion, and I believe I spoke to the treasurer in Lee, and like many towns in the county, they've reserved a cash equal to about roughly 2% of the total liability. So they've essentially just put together small amounts each year, $50,000 roughly, give or take, in addition to their pay-as-you-go expense, to at least start the process of creating that funding reserve.
Right.
I think that's, you could say that's not that important, but I think it is important because it increases the awareness of the fact that it's not fully paid for. And it also gives this particular topic a seat at the table, or more visible seat at the table, if there's a discussion in a particular year where we're fortunate to have excess funds, and to think about what we should do with that money. Should we use that to just purely cut taxes? Should we use that for affordable housing? Should we put some of that in our post-retirement medical benefits reserve? And to the extent that it's set up and established and the numbers are there, I think that conversation would be healthier. But that's my personal opinion. We all need to have time to kind of think about it for ourselves. So the task at hand is, practically speaking, we do need to make a recommendation to the select board in the fall. So we need to start thinking about it now, and sort of start putting together our thoughts, which would ultimately result in some type of recommendation memo to the select board.
Philip, can I have some clarification on the timeline here?
Sure.
So we make a recommendation whether or not to start this process of setting up a trust. It's in the budget season where there's a discussion about putting a certain amount into the trust. Is that
exactly?
correct?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good point. Yeah, so I talked about the trust. The trust is a procedural matter, and again, I don't want to overstate it because it will require a fair amount of work by town staff, but there's a process there. The much more difficult decision is whether or not, as Ann said, to put money into the trust and how much to put in. Where is that money going to come from?
You wanted to comment?
Yes, so we would probably have to do both for during the budget season, because the trust has to be voted on. To adopt a trust has to be voted on at annual town meeting or at a town meeting. And then, so we could do back-to-back articles, to fund it or just to establish it. But I just wanted to let everyone know it has to be voted on at town meeting.
And I guess I do want to share that I did skim through the material you sent around, Phil. It's a lot, and I'm still trying to struggle with why it seems such a complex trust and fund and setup. And so I think you had mentioned, I think it would be great to find a town that maybe done this recently and what their process has been, and we did a lot with this when we were looking into the senior tax deferral and looking at other towns and how they've done it.
Right. No, I think it's very useful. And again, if again, I spoke to Lee it's something we could all do if we have the time to do it. It's complex, but it's actually again it's all, there's a clear roadmap as to what we need to why we need to do it. I think the complexity is driven by a couple of things. One is that the accountants are involved. So when we put this money in a trust, they basically use that trust amount to reduce our liability in our audited financial statements. So a lot of these procedures are all tied to the fact that the accountants need assurances that money is solely dedicated to use for retiree medical benefits. And that's a key. That's a theme that runs through all of this. It's really, you could use the term lockbox. It's solely dedicated for this purpose. We could use it in 20 years. We could use it in 2 years, but it's really only for retiree medical, and other parties such as the accountants, our auditors, and even the rating agencies rely on the fact that it's solely dedicated for this particular use. So that's one, my observation. That's one reason for all of the legalities and procedures associated with it, as opposed to just setting up a bank account where we say, hey, okay, that's money, that money's there.
Okay.
But I don't think it's too bad. I don't think it's too complicated. We have a decision as to whether or not we want to have the town treasurer be responsible for the trust, or whether or not we want to set up a committee which would oversee the trust. We all need to think about that and do our own research, but my sense is initially when the dollars are relatively small, it's perfectly fine to have the treasurer do that, as long as the treasurer agrees. That's what Lee has done as well. That just sort of streamlines the process a bit and avoids having another committee. But hopefully, again, I've done some more reading on this, so that hopefully I'm not getting it wrong. But I do think there's a process there. The much more difficult conversation is how much money to put in there, because that's $1. It's basically adding another budgetary item in our budget process that needs money. So that's never an easy thing to do.
Bill?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
How are the retirees right now in Great Barrington? How are they faring with their medical? I mean, I assume many get Medicare, and they have a supplemental plan as well.
Those are great questions. I'm not qualified to answer that. I've asked for that information. I could send you the actuarial report that has some of that information in there, but it's very high level. So that's a very relevant question, and one that I certainly couldn't give you a good answer to. But go ahead.
I would also just kind of throw out there that no matter how much you have in reserve, is there any kind of danger that you could just bleed out the reserve? And I say that because one pandemic can do it. My husband was in a union in New York City, and AIDS came along, and it was United Scenic Artists, and the medical, the costs of the medical for those that were, that had AIDS and all their medical treatments, the fund almost collapsed because they had already lost a third of their membership.
Very good question. That's one. I mean, that's one reason why, in the accountants' calculations, they're factoring in, 20 years of inflation on medical costs and things like that. So that's how we get up to that big liability number. But it's a very important question. If we had the benefits consultant that's overseeing the retiree medical benefits that the town provides, and then theoretically they could provide those answers to you. But I certainly don't have that. Right. It's a lot of the benefits are Medicare based, and the town is paying a certain co-payment that's contractually agreed upon via collective bargaining agreements or otherwise. So that risk is certainly there, but it's important, but I would view that as really separate from, the sort of the financial issue of the town, which is we have an obligation to pay the employer's share of these benefits for a long time. And that's a significant financial obligation for the town, and we need to fund that over time.
Yeah, I think it sounds good in theory. I just think that, like you said, more discussion.
Oh yeah, no, it's a very, again, I want to make it very clear. This is we could spend 8 weeks easily on this topic, and we're covering it now in 15 minutes, which is not appropriate. But hopefully this is just hopefully to serve as an introduction to the topic. I've been able to spend some time with it. We're foisting it on our new members for the first time potentially tonight, which is not fair, but we have to do that. That's sort of the nature of the first meeting. But it's an important topic that I do think we want to sort of continue through the process where we get some recommendation to the select board in the fall. At the very least, and I think Mark would agree if you were here, we should go ahead and set up the plumbing and the infrastructure of having the trust in place, so that whenever the town elects to put money in there, we're all set and ready to go, and we can do that. Again,
can I ask you something? And I'm actually really glad that you're thinking that way, because I think it's, having an unfunded liability of this magnitude. I think I don't think it would be really the right thing to continue this way. But question I have is, I'm a little bit surprised to hear that the current cost is about $400, but the future liability could be up to $22 million. I think that was the number you quoted. And so my question is, why is that? I mean, and what are those? Are those retiree medical benefits? Are they subject to a certain number of service? When do they get? Yeah,
no, those are all important issues. I don't have good information on that. It's a very complex. We need the experts on that to talk to us about that. But just, again, at a very high level, the $450,000 is what we have to pay in cash in the current year to meet the fund's obligations.
Right.
To meet the town's obligations for that year. The accountant's number of the 20 billion number, and every town and every corporation has this problem. There's nothing unique to Great Barrington here. That's the accountants basically doing this enormously complex calculation and saying, well, the town has to make these payments for its retirees from now into the next 50 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, and they project what those payments are and when people are dying and when they're getting sick.
Right. I mean, that's pretty standard.
And they're basically converting all that into today's dollars, and it's a very complex hypothetical calculation, and that's how that liability is calculated. And again, on the town's website, we have the actuarial report that provides a fair amount of detail on how that's done. So it's a very complex calculation that creates sort of a scary hypothetical number. But it kind of creates a target for us to think about. But just to step back, I put the numbers in the March packet to give you a perspective on, for if you look at the entire, and there's a lot of data on this, the state puts together. Looking at the state as a whole, looking at all the counties and the state, about 6% of that obligation is funded on a statewide basis. So we're at zero. We're not that far off from where the state is. More examples, Lee is funding 2% of its accounting liability. Williamstown, 2.5%. Dalton somehow is funding about half of their obligation. The state, the Commonwealth, is 6% or a little bit above that. So, we're not, it sounds a little scary. I guess the only positive is that we're not that far off from the other towns in the state. But it is I think prior member Tom Blovelt will frequently say this is a scary topic. and it can be a scary topic, but it's just time to. I think it's probably a good time to think about it and to start the process of putting away some acorns on this particular expense. All right. So for those, if any of you are interested, maybe send me an email and I could send you some links to the public information that I've looked at on this topic. If you have some more interest or time on it, it's all public, and that might help you, get a little better feel for some of these points. And yes, and to conclude, in my notes, I noted that Sue is very correct in that all this requires a town meeting vote. So that requires us to, work within that schedule to get us to the point where we can recommend to the select board, who could then vote on it and then put it into the town warrant for next year. So it's just a kind of a lengthy process where we need to be cognizant of the passage of time. Very quickly, next item on the agenda, quarterly update. I just threw this in. This is something that I went ahead and did. I did a direct request to the Department of Local Services and the State Department of Revenue, just to update the data on local option tax revenue that relates to short-term rentals. And there's no sort of clear conclusion here. No smoking gun, nothing really pops out. I just thought that given the debate and the discussion we've had as a town on this topic, there's a frequent request for data. There's not a lot of perfect data on the point, but we do have, based upon the state's record keeping, we have data indicating the room occupancy taxes that the state receives that ultimately make their way to the town, relating to short-term rentals, as well as traditional hotel lodging. And all I did here is add the third quarter for the current fiscal year. So short-term rentals are $59,039. That's the tax revenue to the town. It's percentage piece. And then there's traditional lodging. So again, I'm probably not explaining this properly, but I think it's evident that some people who are vested in this debate or participating in the debate have had interest in seeing this data. They've looked at it. Some have reached out to me to clarify things. They probably have reached out to Sue as well. So we're just providing an update on this. The good news is that the overall tax revenue to the town will be up for the current fiscal year. And as you can see, it's already slightly above what it was for the entirety of last year. So that's the good news.
Can I just ask for clarification? Traditional lodging is hotels and motels?
Correct, yeah.
And inns and Bs type thing? Yeah.
Right.
And that this is at the end of the packet that you sent around for tonight?
Correct, yeah. And this comes directly from the state. I just asked the state for this information and said, I'm in the finance committee, and they happily, very quickly provided it to me. So if anyone has any questions or knows someone who has questions about it, they can, I'm open to, obviously I want to be very transparent about where it came from, and it I just reformatted a bit just to make it a little easier. There's no changes to the data that came directly from the state. Okay, so I guess we're close to concluding. Next topic is our future meeting schedule. I think, Anne, you established our tradition of meeting on the third Tuesday of the month.
Oh, no, that predates me.
Okay, all right.
Why can't I get that page up? That is strange.
Which one?
Oh, it's on the agenda.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I'll pull it up.
So I guess the as everyone thinks about their schedules, a kind of an open issue here is the status of our remote only meetings. My understanding is that remote only is the law through July 15th, I believe. And so we're awaiting for the governor to extend or change or modify those procedures. Unfortunately, I have a sense they will be that remote only will probably continue. But again, obviously, we await the governor's word. But so this is the schedule, and my view is we should keep to this schedule unless anyone has any different opinions. I'm not sure exactly what we're.
It's August 16th, the third Tuesday.
Did I get that wrong? Let's see.
I mean, I don't know my calendar.
That's a very good question.
Just counting the numbers here.
Yeah, that is a very good question.
I'm just looking it up. Well, it's a Tuesday. It's definitely a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yep, it is.
No, it's correct. It's correct. Okay.
Tuesday.
The first Tuesday is the 2nd, then the 9th, then the 16th.
Oh,
okay.
Okay. All right.
All right. I did double check that, so hopefully let's say I got it right. So, and I'm not sure exactly what's on the town scheduling right now, but I thought for December, December is it's going to be a bit of a moving target depending on a lot of other factors. But I was going to suggest we tentatively book December 13th as the second Tuesday for a last meeting, and depending on the budget process and all sorts of other year-end things, we might need to move that or cancel that or whatever. But that's what I'm going to shoot for.
Sounds good.
And okay, just one thing to come back to, because Mark wasn't here, is the process of appointing our 5th member of our committee. And I was going to ask him to speak to the process. My crude summary is that the new member needs to be approved by a joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board, is my understanding. I believe that the Finance Committee can evaluate the individuals interested, if any, in the seat, and then have a recommendation to that joint committee. But that the joint committee will need to sit to make the final decision. So, and who knows when we'll schedule that. But so we are open to all parties who are interested. And if Mark were here, I believe he would suggest that the next step is for those individuals to send a letter to Mark and Amy Pulver at the town and express their interest in the seat. And then we would take it from there. So the process is it's open, and all parties who are interested. I encourage them to send a letter into the town. And if there's any confusion about the process or concerns or questions, please, I suggest those parties contact anyone on the committee or anyone in town, and they'll get to the right place eventually. And did that make sense?
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Citizen speak time. Are there any interested parties there?
Anyone who wants to speak, just raise their hand. Use the raise hand function. I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay. All right. And media time.
No raised hands.
Well, all right. Oh, well. Okay, so then I think we're ready to adjourn. Appreciate
you're recommending, remember, I think it was at the open meeting law meeting, they recommend we do a roll call adjournment.
Yes, and just on that topic, Milena and Madonna, are you going through your entry process with the town clerk about your training and swearing in, all that?
I've already done all that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I just have to finish the test. I mean, I was at the town hall, and I did the training before, but apparently it doesn't count anymore, so I have to do it. Go through that
Okay,
again.
well, it is a bit painful, but it is important.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get into trouble.
Yeah, no, I will. I just didn't have the time to do it like right away. So
Great.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
we'll do that.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Great.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Anne, aye.
Madonna,
aye.
And I agree as well. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.